It's 2007. Movies like Disturbia, starring Shia LaBeouf, and The Golden Compass, based on the book of the same name, have most recently hit theaters. The first is an entire movie about a boy under house arrest discovering that his neighbor might be a serial killer, and The Golden Compass is one of the many adaptations of the book of the same name that will come out throughout the years. All of this is well and good, but that doesn't hold a candle to what is happening for the anime fandom in 2007. In 2007, the Japanese anime television series Mononoke, produced by Toei Animation, launches. It's a spin-off of the 2006 horror anthology series Ayakashi, Samurai Horror Tales. Mononoke follows the character of the medicine seller, who is never named in the anime. This is very important. The medicine seller, in the unnamed character, continues to face a myriad of supernatural perils in the 12-episode anime series. Mononoke takes place between the end of the Edo-Period and the Meiji era of Japan, when the four-class system, with samurai being the highest class and merchant sellers, like the medicine seller himself being on the bottom, are still in full effect. The anime was spawned, manga adaptations, 2 different stage play, and an anime film trilogy, with the first film released in 2024, the second in 2025, and the final one to be released this year. The reason why I bring up Mononoke as an anime is because, just look at it. It's beautiful and compelling and full of really new, innovative animation techniques that haven't been seen for quite a while. And considering the anime itself is almost 20 years old at this point, I don't think we could ever recreate the majesty of Mononoke. But why am I talking about it? Because Mononoke, I don't know if anybody knows this, but I'm going to just say it anyway. Mononoke labels itself as a ghost story, a mystery, a psychological horror. And that's pretty important, just because when you're watching the series, all of these things are true, but some of these don't follow the same steps. Here's how Mononoke usually goes. The medicine seller shows up where he needs to be in the episode. He has to find out what the Mononoke even is, even if he can guess what it is. He has to learn the shape of it, meaning, what is it? The truth of it, meaning why is it really here, and the reasoning behind that truth. What is its reasoning behind what it's doing? Only then can he unsheath his magical sword and exorcise the demon. I know that sounds silly, but this sword is sentient and actually completely divorced from the medicine seller. It's its own entire entity that is super important to the plot, even though the sword itself never talks. And by that I mean, in later episodes, what form it takes when it's fighting the Mononoke, that talks. The sword, when you see it when it comes out of the box, is just there. And that's kind of funny to me. So why are we even talking about this? If it's not technically a ghost stories or a mystery or a psychological horror, why am I speaking about it? 2 reasons. 1, fell back in love with this series. I forgot how much I loved it when I first watched it. And number 2, with the release of these new movies, it's actually been a resurgence in the Mononoke fandom, of which there is not many. I think there's 19 people that actually make art and everything about Mononoke. So I just want to talk about it. I'm going to go through every single little arc in the anime in this super extra spicy long video, because I find it's important and I want to talk about it. First of all, Mononoke, 10 out of 10. Totally should watch it. It's free on YouTube. You have 0 excuses, and it's almost 20 years old. So, I'm going to say spoiler warning here, but after 20 years, it's not my fault if you haven't seen it. Okay? Okay. So, first of all, that's the whole plot, right? The medicine seller finds the Mononoke, defeats them. Everything in the middle is different, but not really. That's every single episode. It's only the story itself that changes. What I want to talk about is the fact that Mononoke really looks like a kabuki play. I don't know if anybody knows this, but I'm just going to tell you, because of course I'm going to tell you. That's why it's an extra long video going through all 12 episodes. When I'm talking about Japanese kabuki, I mean the traditional classical form of Japanese theater, which is mixing dramatic performances with traditional dance and also traditional makeup. Kabuki theater is known for its heavily stylized performances, its glamorous, highly decorated costumes, and the elaborate kumadori makeup worn by most of its performers. For the record, this kabuki part of it will come back in later. Skip to this timestamp when we get to where I'm going to be talking about next that also correlates with kabuki, but for right now we're going to stay with the kabuki aspect. Kabuki is thought to have originated in the early Edo period, when the art's founder, Izumo no Okuni, formed a female dance troupe that performed dances and light sketches in Kyoto. The art form later developed into its own present all-major theatrical, iteration after women were banned from performing in Kabuki Theater in 1629, which is not a lot of time because Kabuki was founded in 1603. So, just so we are clear, that's only 26 years. A woman could have been born, learned the art, and banned from it in the exact same amount of time all of this happened. So that's a fun fact to know. And it was developed by a woman, which is even more hilarious. Guys really do be ruining everything for us. Jesus. Anyway, Kabuki developed through the late 17th century and reached its zenith in the mid-18th century. In 2005, Kabuki Theater was proclaimed as an integral heritage possessing outstanding value universally for Japanese citizens. It was inscribed in the represented list of the intangible cultural heritage of humanity. Link in the description below, because that's not really important to read all this, but it's really important to understand that Kabuki Theater and the other form of theater I will talk about later in this video are interwoven into Japanese society, and it's really present in Mononoke, based entirely how it looks, how everything is set up. It's even set up like a stage play. Act 1, Act 2, the end. All of it. From the sound design to how everything is set up. It's basically an elaborate kabuki play. Now, I did say I was going to go through episodes 1 through 12, and when I was saying arcs, I do mean that. Every arc is split up into about 2 episodes apiece. The beginning of the play and the end of the play. And that is really important, is because these movies that have come out, Mononoke, movie that came out in 2024, the movie that came out in 2025, and the one that will be released sometime this year will also be getting their own videos. But until I get through the original, you're not going to understand the movies, because you need to understand what we're dealing with. So, we're just going to talk about it. The first 2 episodes open up on an inn, and the medicine seller, who is nameless, which is important to the story, is introduced to us. It's raining, it's an inn, it's terrible weather, and so this is the opening of our play. The medicine seller manages to snag the final room available at this inn. Not too long after he gets there, a very, very heavily pregnant woman shows up as well, hooting and hollering and proclaiming that if they don't let her stay here, they'll find her dead in the streets tomorrow. This is very important because this pregnant woman is named Shino. Shino is our main protagonist through all of this. It's her story that we are following along with the medicine sellers. The medicine seller is technically the hero, but it's Shino's story. Really important to understand that. Shino is given a room that the woman who owns the inn says is basically not normally used or reserved for anybody, and Shino is very grateful. Throughout the entire time all of this is happening, we, the audience, are told auditorily that there are children everywhere in this inn.
じゃあ、あの足音は？笑い声は？おかみさんと歩いていた時に聞こえてきたでしょ？何も？え？ほら、そのあたりにも子供たちがたくさん。That's super not what is happening. The children that we keep hearing are the Mononoke. They are the evil spirits that are running amok and causing havoc and all that other jazz. They are attracted to Shino because she is heavily pregnant and she really, really wants her baby to be born. We, throughout the episode, come to find out that Shino was a maid for a very well-to-do family. She was sleeping around with that well-to-do family's oldest son. He gets her pregnant. Before finding out about her pregnancy, he proclaims to her in that lovey-dovey honeymoon way that he wants to marry her. When she indicates to him that she is with child, his tune very suddenly changes, and the baby is now a problem, because Shino is not from a noble, well-to-do, pure-blooded family, so they don't want her child to be connected to them. This causes problems. The man that she is outrunning from, which we see in the very first instance that she's even introduced to us, is important, is because the Mononoke end up killing
the guy who was hired to kill her because they are attracted to her and her want to have them. You're introduced to the monster pretty quick because the medicine seller indicates to us what it is. These evil little monsters are, well, I'll just let him introduce them because it's easier.
ここにいるのは屋敷につなぎ止められたもののけ、子供、赤子の声、そして用水。こりゃ座敷わらしだ。
These little monsters are basically children who died before they even had a chance to be born, either through no fault of their own or through actively being gotten rid of, which is 99% of this story. These ones specifically were killed in this exact room. We as the audience come to find out that this inn, a long time ago, used to be a brothel. And this is where everything happens. This is the catalyst of why these things are here. During the Edo period, the Tokugawa shogunate regulated prostitution by confining it to official pleasure quarters, literally red light districts, called yukaku. These were located in Yoshiwara in Edo, Shimbara in Kyoto, Shinmachi in Osaka, just to name a few. Women who worked there were known broadly as yujo, literally women of pleasure. If I'm not saying this right, I know I'm not saying it right, so forgive me. Their lives were shaped by strict social and economic structures. Why does that matter? Well, because most of these women usually didn't show up of their own free will. A lot of them were sold or indentured by their own families to be state-regulated prostitutes. Many girls were sold by their families on purpose, often due to poverty or debt, to brothel owners or agents, known as jushonin, who recruited for the pleasure quarters. In some tragic cases, girls as young as 5 to 10 years old were sold into contracts. And that's never good when that's as young as we're going, because it's just not. If I need to explain to you why that's bad, you have deeper issues and deeper problems. So, once in a brothel, women were typically bound by debt contracts, and these debt contracts were super duper predatory. The brothel paid a sum to the family or agent and then expected the women to work off that debt through what she earned by being a prostitute, and until that debt was repaid, which was usually impossible given how high they made the debt for these women, because they charged them from everything, from housing them to clothing them to feeding them to giving them toiletries. Anything that they could add to that debt to, they were gonna do it. Meaning, she could not leave freely. They were predatory from the word go. And you might be thinking, well, what about women that decided to not be part of the shogunate regulated prostitution ring? Thanks so much for asking. Women in legally licensed quarters like Yoshiwara were regulated by the shogunate and were under a little bit more protection. However, others operated in unlicensed districts, okabasho, were caught, well, if they were caught by authorities, they could be forced into the licensed brothels as a form of punishment or servitude. So, you trying to get out of basically having a debt contract sometimes doesn't work, because if they catch you, they'll throw you in one anyway. There was really no way out of it. So then why did they have them? Well, it was a way for women to earn money, because again, with the 4-class system in full effect, with samurai being the highest and merchants being the lowest, brothels sit as the unspoken about 5th class of it. You're just there. Women either were high-ranking women, women that worked in the fields, women that worked in merchant towns, or women that were just living their lives being mothers to everybody in between. Prostitutes lived basically on the fringes, even though it was totes legal. Once in the pleasure quarters, women often started in junior roles before even becoming full-fledged courtesans. It's not like they bought them, put them in a nice dress, and threw them out to the wolves. Because it was a shogunate, which in this case like a state-regulated prostitution ring, there was more things that had to be done. Anyone who was a child, komuro, or child attendants, usually began as, like, I'm just gonna call them what they were, like gophers for the higher-ranking people. Fetching them this, fetching them that, learning social arts like music, conversation, and deportment. They weren't just thrown into it, they were raised into it. Then we have the shinzo, or the apprentice courtesans. These are the, I'm not going to call them the older ones, but a little bit older girls who were part entertainer and part prostitute, like a waitress at Hooters. But they only got there after training and they advanced into the apprenticeship. Again, you're not just thrown in, you are raised into it. Then you have full courtesans and all the ranks thereafter. Over time, with training and success, some could rise through ranks, and ultimately any high-ranking courtesan who were educated women prized for arts, conversation styles, as well as sexual services would sometimes earn more money, but again, the contracts are predatory, and they're predatory by design. You can't get out of them because you can never earn enough money to get out of them. And they would usually do this really controversial practice, not all the time, but in some brothels they did, called mizuage. It's a controversial ceremony where they mark young apprentices' transition into adult status with the surrender of her virginity to the highest bidder. This is a major economic event for brothels and often marked the moment when a girl becomes a fully working sex worker rather than a trainee. And whoever is the highest bidder, the amount does go to the girl's contract and her debt, but again, it's designed so that way she can never really get out of it. Women generally could not leave the brothel of their own terms until one of two things happened. Their debts are paid off, or a patron buys them out. Usually if a patron buys you out, it's for the purpose of money, but not always. Like, some of them wanted to marry you. Not all of them. Anyone who didn't pay off their debt or were bought out usually never escaped the brothel, and they ended up working until they were too old or too ill to continue. So then, why am I bringing this up? Why am I bringing up the fact that all of this terrible stuff is happening in these brothels? Because the inn used to be a brothel in Mononoke. The room that the woman Shino is staying in, where all of these Mononoke are congregating, was a room for abortions. I know I kept sidestepping it, but we're just gonna go straight into it right here, right now. Abortion rooms, amazingly enough, were actually pretty common in brothels. In licensed pleasure quarters like Yoshiwara, women's value was tied to their ability to work continuously as entertainers and sex workers. Pregnancy directly interfered with this ability, because pregnant women could not serve customers while visibly pregnant, meaning she couldn't earn money for the brothel or herself. Brothels are predatory. The contract is predatory. Brothels are run like a business that depends on constant labor and income from the women inside of them. A worker who couldn't work is seen as a financial liability inside of them, especially for lower-ranking women who had to pay down their debts. Because of this economic pressure, abortions were common among prostitutes as a way to avoid the loss of income and maintain their status quo and lifestyle. Not a lifestyle they wanted, but it's better than being out on the street. Some methods were dangerous and self-administered because safe medical procedures just didn't exist in Meiji or Edo-Period Japan, and birth control options are super limited in this time in history all across the board. Also, pregnancy just ended up clashing with the image of brothels. In the pleasure quarters, women, especially courtesans, were expected to maintain a certain appearance. A visible pregnancy undermined the curated image of a sexually available and desirable entertainer. Brothel managers and patrons alike often saw pregnancy as incompatible with the role of a courtesan. This cultural expectation meant that pregnancy was often treated as a problem to be solved relatively quickly, sometimes through abortion rather than maternity leave or other accommodations. Even high-ranking courtesans, the ones that people paid out the nose to see, were not given the magical ability just to have a baby and call it good. I know all of us have seen The Apothecary Diaries. I love it. 10 out of 10. You also have to remember, sometimes some stuff is just stretched out to make it seem cool. Mao Mao most likely would not have made it to life, because her mother being a courtesan, especially in ancient China, it's definitely not how that would have played out. But for the sake of the story, it has to. Women in Edo-Period brothels in Japan, because this is where Mononoke takes place, generally had very limited personal autonomy to begin with. And because so many of them were bound by debt contracts, that meant their freedom was already restricted until they paid what the brothel had advanced for their purchases or training. Because of these contracts, women couldn't freely leave, make reproductive choices without brothel approval or economic consequences. She had nowhere to go. There was no lateral movement. She went to jail, she could not pass go, she will not collect $200. She's stuck right there. This meant that in cases of pregnancy, women often had little power to resist pressure from brothel owners or management to terminate the pregnancy in order to keep working. During the Edo period in Japan, abortions and other forms of birth control, including mabiki, which was just infanticide, were used socially for economic and practical reasons, and they were relatively common among the poor and working class. Here's the only little bit of a silver lining on this. Authorities sometimes tried to regulate these practices, but the enforcement of this regulation was super uneven. In other words, while there were laws and cultural attitudes against it, in practices, these abortions continued because contraceptive and safe abortion options were limited, if not existent at all. Economic pressure was intense for poor women and sex workers, and there was just no modern way of dealing with pregnancy in Edo and Meiji era Japan. Either you had the ability to have a baby, or you didn't. And if you were a brothel worker, you didn't. So yes, Mononoke is considered a ghost story. It's considered psychological horror, but a lot of it is just straight up cultural implications, cultural fears. It's like the curses in Jujutsu Kaisen. A lot of it is, this is very central to Japanese history and how the Japanese view these fears and these monsters. The first 2 episodes of Mononoke are about Shino and her pregnancy, and these little monsters born out of the anger from the prostitutes and the unborn children that were aborted in that room. It's not the baby's fault. They are feeling what they are feeling. The reason why this arc, which is exactly what it is so compelling is because Shino wants her baby to live more than anything in the world. And that's super duper fine. But the woman that owns the inn brings up a really good point to her. How are you going to do that? You don't have any skills outside of being a maid. You're a really low-ranking person. Are you seriously going to bring another mouth to feed? Shino is so invested in her baby, though, that she doesn't care. She wants her baby to live above everything else. And that's fine. That's super duper fine. Her conviction towards her child is inevitably what ends up being the weakness of these other Mononoke. They realize that their frustration and their anger at what their lot in life was is completely valid and completely rational. But it's not fair to take it out on Shino because she does want her baby to live. And that's fine. That's great. It's the reason why the medicine seller ends up able to get one up on them and is able to exorcise them. It is unclear, for the record, if Shino ends up living through this ordeal. For the sake of my own sanity, I like to think that yes, she did. More likely than not, she didn't, is because in the episode, she begins to bleed heavily, and it is implied that her child is dying inside of her during this altercation. But that's up to you how you take it. A little side tangent here. I absolutely hate Memoirs of a Geisha. I hate it. Ooh, I hate it so much. There is one thing, though, that it did do correctly. It does show you how much pressure courtesans, or geishas, I guess in this instance for people watching, go through in order to even become courtesans. It's terrible, it's shitty, it's just not nice. And that's kind of the point. These women are forced to be entertainers in brothels all the time. It is told to you in Mononoke that the woman who owns the inn used to be a brothel worker, and she inherited the inn when it changed business practices. So yes, that old brothel worker still has certain ideals about what is going on. It's the reason why she talks the way she does. It's the reason why she dresses the specific way she does. It's the reason why she knows what the monster is, and she won't say it, because she was one of the women in that room at one point, either administering the abortion or getting one, which is really sad. So Arc 2 of Mononoke opens on a boat, and we are introduced to all of the major cast pretty quickly, because at this point, from the past 2 episodes, we've gotten the gist of what's going on. So where are we actually? We're technically on a ship going to a different part of Japan. And the unfortunate bystanders of this episode have run into what I'm only going to call Japan's version of the Bermuda Triangle. The reason why this is kind of funny is because I didn't know there was other countries' version of the Bermuda Triangle. In retrospect, that makes 100% complete sense. Japan is an island, and it's not that far away from other land masses. No duh, it would make a triangle somewhere. What's actually really prevalent in this episode is two factors. Number one is the fact that we are introduced pretty quickly to the concept of water ghosts, and number two, we are also introduced to the fact that the medicine seller has become such an important figure in all of this Mononoke BS that one of the female characters, actually the only female character in this episode, was part of a previous adventure that has become common nomenclature and myth. I'm just gonna let her tell you about it, because it's part of the episode.
あの人が堺の化け猫騒動を鎮めたんですよ! So why am I bringing this up? Because it helps actually flesh out the world pretty good. The fact that there is Japan's version of Bermuda Triangle, that there's water ghost, and that this Mononoke bull honky has been happening for so long and is so far widespread that some stories have just straight up become local myth that is passed around like spooky ghost stories. It's really interesting. We are not present for what this girl went through because it's not played out for us here in the anime, but that does mean that it was prevalent somewhere else, i.e. the manga. I'm not gonna cover the manga because in all honesty, I just don't want to read that much. I've got too much on my to be read pile. It's at my hip. I can't read anymore. I'm a very short person. A to be read pile at 5 feet 1 inch is like deep. I'm drowning in stuff to be read. Anyway, total non sequitur. So, we're introduced, like I said, to water ghosts. And the water ghosts in this do not play games. They are more than happy to throw hands. And the reason why this happens is because they are literally thrown off course by somebody that is also on the boat ride with them. I guess we should run down all of the major players in this game. We are introduced to the man who owns the boat.
ではまず私めから三国屋多門と申します。かつて御朱印船だったこのソラリス丸で南蛮や西国の珍しいものを江戸で商いするまあケチな商人でございます。
That's it. He just owns the boat. That's all it is. He's just a guy. We're introduced to a samurai on board.
そちらのお侍様よろしければお名前を。佐々木兵衛。
who is very interested in seeing the medicine seller's famed Mononoke killing sword, to which the medicine seller reminds him and the audience that's not how this sword works. At all. Not even a little bit. We're also introduced to these pair of monks, a man who is obviously higher ranking than his younger counterpart. The younger counterpart is awestruck by the older monk.
こちらは五大寺の元慶様でございます。私は身の回りのお世話をさせていただく宗元と申します。
And then we have, like I said, the girl who was prevalent in a different story that the medicine seller was a part of that we are not privy to.
KŌDŌです。前は堺のお屋敷で奉公してたんですけど。
あの化け猫騒動の堺家とな。
有名なんだ。
This is our chord cast, and they are going to make up. Nope, I lied. I almost forgot about this guy, but also the anime goes out of its way to sometimes just straight up ignore him. Oh, this guy's just here. I honestly wish I could tell you what he does or what he is. He talks.
身どもは柳玄陽斎。見ての通り修験の身である。この世にあらざるものを払いながら安堵。
Anyway, so because they are thrown off course, they land in literally Japan's Bermuda Triangle, and they unfortunately come across a myriad of different water ghosts, one of which, I might add, is super duper prevalent in Japanese mythology. This little thing just straight up asks you questions, and then it decides, you know what sounds like a really good idea? Just making you live out your worst fear, because no matter what you answer me, I'm just gonna make it worse. Legitimately, the guy, who I don't remember the name of, and the anime is trying really hard to, like, okay, we don't really care about you, tries to be slick and answers, my greatest fear is dumplings. And then thing's like, alright man, bet. And then it doesn't show you what his fear is because if you're not going to take it seriously, why should the thing that's haunting you take it seriously?
俺が一番怖いのはまんじゅうだまんじゅうが怖い
落語かよ
おこれはなんとビビな酒蒸しの
どんな幻を見せられたかあんまり想像したく
It's still enough to make him have a whole panic attack. This actually is a really good jumping off point for this particular little Mononoke. It's not even a Mononoke. It's technically considered an Ayakashi, which is different than Mononoke. Please be advised that Ayakashi does not have a one-for-one direct English translation. It is not even well described or agreed upon with Japanese scholars. The people who literally are the monitors of this myth cannot agree if it's a god, a monster, some weird third thing that cannot be identified, I don't know, man. They cannot agree on what this thing is. At this point, we can just agree that the Ayakashi is a Euclidean liquid, at this rate, because nobody can agree on it. The anime even tells you this, just boom, right there. So, why are we here? As this show progresses and goes on, we actually find out who is the one that set them adrift, and it's no surprise if you're paying at all a little bit attention, they kind of advertise the bad guy in every single arc, which I think is nice. But just in case you have never watched it, in which case that's why you're watching this, or you have watched it and you're just listening to me prattle on, the older monk is the one that set this all adrift. And that's important, is because the older monk has to give to us, the audience, and also the other people aboard this ship, his reasoning behind it. FYI, his reasoning is not funny. It is super uncomfortable to sit there and listen to this man's tragic tale of what happened.
私とおようはこの海の近くにある小さな島で生まれた。父母は早くに海で亡くなった。おようとは5つ違いで他に同じ年頃の子供もいなかったため、私とおようはいつも一緒に過ごした。本当に仲が良かった。いや、むしろ良すぎたのかもしれない。
For two reasons. One, because of the implication of what this says about Edo and Meiji era Japan, which is a whole nother thing that we don't have time to discuss, but we should. Anyway, and number two is because of the tragedy of what actually happened to this dude's sister. Like, the sister is objectively the main catalyst for all of this. She is not the Mononoke. We're just gonna get that out of the way before we go any further. She is not the Mononoke. So, to recap, this man and his sister grew up on an island, divorced from the main bread and butter of Japan, and they were more or less the only kids, and by the time other kids came around, they were too old to give a fuck about these other kids, which is important. The reason why the first part that I said makes it so gross is because these two, since they had nobody else, for reasons unknown to man and God and the creepy shadow monster that lives underneath your mattress, they start to develop romantic feelings for each other despite being blood related. Listen, okay? I cannot stress this enough. I do not know why this incest shit is so prevalent in Japanese media. I wish I could tell you. But I personally cannot explain why that is. Something, keeping bloodlines pure, something, it's an island nation, everybody is 6 degrees separated anyway, something, grain of salt. There. I didn't want to research why for this, and in all honesty, kinda glad I didn't, because I don't want to. Anyway. Because this weird incest shit is going on with this guy, and I cannot stress that enough that it is weird. The elders of this little island that they grew up on were like, no, that's okay. we're good. We're gonna send you off to be a monk. And he's like, cool, bet, awesome. Before he can actually fulfill this dream, another thing happens. Also, again, with the sister. And I cannot believe that I am having to put in so much, like, red tape and everything that goes with this, but I'm going to try really, really hard to make this as streamlined as possible. So, here's the thing, right? What's happening? The incest shit, he wants to be, off and away as you do forever, bye-bye, and then this other thing happens. This is what is prevalent with the sister. She trades places with him to get on this boat that is not really a boat. It's a hollowed out log that they end up sealing and chucking into the ocean for something, whatever.
いかなる次第でお葉さんが入ることに。
島の者たちはそれは見事な船を作り上げた。それがこのうつろ船。できたばかりの時はそれは美しい仕立てであった。船出を控えた夜明けに私はお葉と再会した。お葉は16の美しい娘になっていた。会わねばよかったのかもしれない。いや、どちらにしても私はうつろ船に乗ることはできなかったであろう。私は怖くなったのだ。内側からは出られない。うつろ船に乗って仏になることなど私にはとてもできないのだと分かったのだ。そんな私の育児のなさ、情けなさをお葉は優しさだと言った。この私にそんな言葉がふさわしくないということは誰より私が知っていたのだ。しかしもう船出の時は近い。島の者たちは私が柱となることを求めているのだ。するとお葉は言った。兄様の代わりにこのお葉がうつろ船に乗りますと。
Okay, you know what? I feel like I've been dancing around this, and the only reason why is because water ghosts are hard to describe and explain to native English speakers. So I'm going to try my bestest to explain it, and it's not going to go good because there's no way to explain it. Actually, that's not true. There might be a comparison, but like it's not like northern stuff, it's not Western American stuff. It is super duper Louisiana Bayou water spirits that we'd have to talk about, and I am not well versed in that. But like, we have our own version of it. Oh, it just came to me. Ya Llorona. There's the American version of it. Why is she by water? I don't know, man. Something, her legend says she's by water. Something, she drowned her kids. Something. You can Google it. Anyway, okay. So here it is, right? The actual opening of this starts out where the guy that nobody wants to listen to at all is talking about vengeful spirits, yurai. Specifically, the funai yurai, which are just straight up the ghost of people who drowned at sea or in rivers. Take your pick. Since we're in the ocean, it's at sea. They're widely found in coastal folklore throughout Japan and have been told since at least the Edo-Period. The Edo-Period, by the by, went from the year 1603 to 1868. So it's a long time. Then we hop into the Meiji era. But right now, this is where we're at. Anime, Mononoke, takes place between the Edo and Meiji era, specifically somewhere between 1868 and 1869, depending on which way you want to go. Either way, that's where we're at. That's why this is important. This little ghost story is just like a collection of folk tales and maritime traditions. The reason why these are important is because it does come up legitimately in the first part of this anime. They often appear during stormy nights, foggy weather, or around coastal waterways, specifically during seasonal observations like Oban, when spirits are believed to roam. Funai yuri may appear as ghostly figures in white funeral cloth, as phantom boats, or as eerie lights on the wave. Eerie lights are common everywhere with ghost stories. Take that how you're gonna take it. One common motif is that they ask sailors for a ladle, and they just say, hey man, give me that, and then we're gonna scoop water into our boat, trying to sink it. Why? Great question. Don't know. This is not a Western tradition. This is not a Western story. I am just a woman who really likes anime trying to tell you what's going on. However, I can tell you a couple other facts. Folk countermeasures include giving them a bottomless ladle, which means there's like a hole in the bottom of it, or throwing rice or ash into the sea, or maintaining ritual taboos about fishing on certain nights or places and avoiding them, and everything that has with water ghosts. Like, it's not hard to understand. The reason why I bring this up is because in this anime, at one point, this guy that nobody wants to let talk does actually try to use ash to scare off some of the water ghosts, and it doesn't work because it's not the right kind of ash.
船主、急いでかまどの灰を集めて持ってきてくれ。
はいですか。
そう、急いで。
へいへい、五郎丸。
私も手伝う。
塩ではなく灰とは。
いい質問だ。塩は海にいくらでもある。船幽霊には無効なのだ。
これで大丈夫なの？
船主、薪を束ねた縄はどうしている？
へい、薪と一緒に焼いておりますが。
そうか、薪以外の灰が混ざってしまったら
もうじゃよけの効果はない。
Which is important, right? Just like salt in Western cultures can be used against demons, ash can also be used, but it's not just any ash, it has to be a specific kind. Like, a really specific kind. You can't use fire born from, example, right? You can't use fire ash from paper on these things. It has to be wood. Why? Tradition. Please understand that. It's tradition. But there is deeper symbolism behind these specific monsters when they are talked about. They embody the dangers and the unpredictability of the sea and the unsettled dead who have no rest. Basically, in a lot of cultures, not just Japanese culture, if the dead are not put to rest correctly, they're gonna keep coming back because you didn't put them to bed in the way that is demanded. Which is why the sea is spooky and haunted and you shouldn't go on it. This message brought to you by somebody who has extreme motion sickness and will not get in the water. Thanks. The Ayakashi also, again, play a prevalent role in this, even though I said they can't agree if it's a ghost, if it's a demon, a non-Euclidean liquid. Nobody knows, right? Nobody knows what Ayakashi is. However, Ayakashi is a broad term for supernatural phenomenon associated with water surfaces in this context. In certain regions, especially Western Japan, atmospheric light or strange shapes above the sea or rivers can be called Ayakashi. Local legends suggest they manifest as ghostly little flame shapes resembling people or mountains for some reason over water, or sudden atmospheric apparitions before storms. In some coastal folklore, Ayakashi are seen as restless spirits of the dead trying to draw the living into danger, similar to how the Funari tradition dictates. Again, there is no direct translation to what this is, so take a grain of salt every time that Ayakashi come up, because they come up a lot in this anime. Now, when I was talking about the little guy who asks you what your greatest fear is, there is like an actual name for him. They're in Yumi Bozu, a sea monk. They're giant shadowy sea spirits that appear to sailors like as bald little guys from calm waters. It's weird. But they do sometimes describe them as spirits of drowned priests and monks are prevalent in this arc, who perished at sea and now linger in restless forms. They often appear unexpectedly on otherwise calm seas, causing violent waves or sinking ships or being evil. It's fine. You know what? You go with it. That's the price you pay for being out on the water. Legend says they might demand a ladle, just like their predecessor, the Funayuri, attempting to flood vessels, or telling of a shared dramatic role within all of these boast ghosts. But that's just it. This one little guy is super widespread along Japan's coast, and they are pretty whatever. In traditional Japanese belief, water is a threshold between the living world and the spirit world. This is not new. Many cultures also have their version of the river Styx. Water is just a transportation vessel for it. However, many drowned spirits were thought to become onryo, vengeful ghost, or yokai, depending on which one you want to pick, that linger near the site of their death. This belief likely helped people make sense of the many dangers associated with travel, fishing, and seasonal floods before modern understanding of nature. That can be boiled down to most ghost stories, though, on most urban legends. Why do we not do this? I don't know, man. Some guy disappeared up in the mountains in the middle of bumfuck winter and never came back. Sure. It was whatever was out living in the woods. He probably got lost and never came back. But that's not how ancient humans did anything. That's why myths are really prevalent. It was trying to make sense of everything that happened. So there's actually some historical context to all of this. I know I sound really dismissive, but this is the 5th time I've had to record this, so I'm just a little upset. I don't know if you can tell. I'm sorry for my very aggressive voice. Anyway, the historical context behind this is that the legends of these water ghosts were especially popular in Edo-Period, especially during the Edo-Period, because at this point in time, it's still not to the point where technology is moving super fast, but it's still just enough in the past where people are still super believable of it. Does that make sense? This is happening before the modern invention of so much stuff, Jesus. That these historical connotations of all these water ghosts are still really prevalent. If you go back like 200 years anywhere in the world talking about ghost, somebody's gonna pop up with the ghost they totally saw. It's not a ghost they totally saw, it's just a ghost story that has been passed down from generation to generation. Specifically along coastlines though, because the water is just so, it's just so watery that it's easy to just mistake common things for exactly what they are, common things. I guess I should actually say that because, I'm trying not to really put it into that many words, but I guess it's gonna have to be. Before the early 17th century and 18th century, which is the Edo period, and this is all the way right around the world, glasses were not a thing. I need to stress that. I am not trying to dismiss anything in this really long Mononoke video, but I am gonna bring it up. Until about the 17th or 18th century, glasses were not very common. People either could see, or they had blurry vision and didn't say anything because, well, what else are you gonna do? This could actually contribute to a lot of ghost stories that we have, is that somebody saw something, and because they couldn't see it clearly, it became something else. But again, that's a little fun 2-cent thing that actually doesn't have any meaning to this. I just wanted to remind people, glasses are a fairly new occurrence, especially glasses for your piss poor eyesight. This message brought to you by somebody who is actually so blind that I cannot legally walk without my glasses. So that's fun. Anyway, this arc is by and large gross on 2 levels. One, for the weird incest shit that I don't want to touch, and I'm not going to touch it. You can't make me. And number 2, for the fact that this guy straight up tries to gaslight us, the audience, that he totally did love his sister, but also when she said, hey, I'll take your place and go die in this wooden log ride from hell, he was happy about it.
出世してんだよ。坊主になったのも出世していい生活して死ぬためなんかじゃねえ。まっこと残念だ。助かった。こいつはバカじゃねえのか。
This is just a weird section of the story, not because it is bad, but because it's hard to describe water ghosts, because they're not common in certain places in the United States. Therefore, I don't know where my audience lives, but if you live on a coastline, how is it being near the ocean when it's cold? I'm curious. I've been told that it's brutal, but I wouldn't know. I live in the mountains. My snowfall is vastly different from yours. If you live near the ocean, tell me about the water coastline. I'm so interested in that. But that's the thing. Water ghost is entirely dependent in America on where you live. In landlocked states, especially desert landlocked states, what water ghosts exist? I'm super serious. All ghost stories are extraordinarily restricted to the area into which they are being told. There's not a lot of water ghosts in a lot of desert countries is because the people that manage to live near the coastline don't really have a lot of ghost stories around there, and if they do, people that live super inland roll their eyes at them because, oh, listen to me complain about the water overabundantly in the ocean, blah 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 blah. Again, I can't stress to you enough that this is just a weird arc. We are told pretty quickly who the bad guy is, we are told why he's doing this, and the medicine seller has, I think, the funniest interaction with this girl is because at one point she's like, you know what, maybe it's him, maybe he's enjoying this, and he just looks at her and goes, I don't know, maybe, a non-answer, he's such a little shit in this.
本当はこの人、誰の味方なの？
あんまり怖い顔していると嫁のもらい手がなくなる。
大きなお世話です。聞いても本当のこと言いそうにないけど聞きます。薬売りさんが羅針盤を細工したんじゃないんですよね。
どうだかね。
Oh, I guess this is also a really good time since this is the 4th time I've tried to record this, so I'm just gonna put it here. Yes, the medicine seller has pointy little ears. If you're thinking to yourself, well, is he a Mononoke too? Great question. Thanks for asking. No, he's not. But he is always presented to us as the most aesthetically pleasing person in the room. That's on purpose, because of course it is. He's the main character. But yeah, that's it. This arc is weird. I really wish I could not make this sound more dismissive than it already is, but I promise you, you have to watch this episode, which is episode 3, 4, and 5. Right? It's a 3-parter in order to understand everything, because it's just so goofy to like try and put into words without having enough cultural context to go behind it, because there's just not enough water ghosts in Western culture. And if there are, I don't know enough of them, and I'm willing to admit that. The third arc in Mononoke is, in my personal opinion, one of the saddest arcs that there is in the entire show. While all the other ones are very much psychological horrors, this one talks about something that hits a little bit closer to home for most modern audiences. The episode starts out with the medicine seller and the main character of this arc sitting in a jail cell together, of which she does comment to him, "It's weird that they have you in here with me." Back in Edo and Meiji era Japan, the sexes were kept as separated as they possibly could be, outside of just existing around each other in the common spaces like walking around. The reason why this is prevalent is because the medicine seller is there and keeps asking her about the supposed killings that she did. There is a rumor going around town that he makes mention of, that they say that you're in here because you killed your husband and his family. Your husband, who was a prominent samurai. Once again, samurai make an appearance in this show and this story narrative. The woman is absolutely dismissive of everything of it, and in short order we are introduced to what we are supposed to immediately believe is the Mononoke. The Mononoke, of course, appears to us as a man wearing a no mask. I don't mean no like the word, I mean no like the Japanese play. Before I hop into the rest of the synopsis, I'm just going to explain what the Noh play is. Noh Theater developed in the 14th century during the Muromachi period, emerging from earlier performance traditions such as Sarugaku, which is acrobatic folk performances, shrine dances, and also Buddhist ritual dramas. It was formalized by Zemi Motokyo and his father, Kanami, who refined Noh into a highly stylized, poetic, and theatrical format. Noh gained elite patronage, particularly from the Ashikaga shogunate, and became closely associated with samurai culture, Zen Buddhism, and Shinto ritual aesthetics. The theme and style of Noh is slow, minimalistic, overly symbolic, and deeply spiritual. Common elements of Noh include masks representing ghosts, women, gods, demons, or madness. Noh Theater also is recognized for its sparse movements and restrained gestures compared to its Kabuki counterpart. Chanting vocals and instrumental music are also a highlight of Noh Theater. The stage, again, compared to its Kabuki counterpart, is nearly barren, with a painted pine tree backdrop. The core themes of Noh tend to be impermanence, memory and regret, haunting spirits tied to unresolved trauma, Buddhist ideals of suffering and release. Many Noh plays involve ghosts recounting their suffering to a traveling monk, blending theater with religious contemplation. The audience and social role of Noh is vastly different from Kabuki insofar as that it's performed primarily for aristocrats and samurai, functioned as a moral instruction and spiritual reflection to those patrons, and treated as high art, requiring education to fully appreciate. Noh has preserved almost unchanged for centuries and is still performed in nearly the same format up to today. The reason why Noh is so recognizable is because where Kabuki is performed on a rectangular stage play, Noh Theater operates in a very limited box play. Therefore, you can tell which one you're looking at based entirely on not only the performance, but also the stage itself. The reason why I keep bringing up Kabuki Theater in this instance is because Kabuki, like I said earlier in this video, emerged around 1603, founded by Izumo no Uki, a shrine dancer who performed flamboyant dances back in Kyoto. Kabuki began as bold, erotic, satirical, and socially disruptive. It was immediately popular with townspeople, merchants, artisans, laborers that were often excluded from elite culture like the samurai class. Therefore, the main difference between Kabuki Theater is that it is for everyone, assuming they can pay the admission price or happen to catch it. Noh Theater is you have to be able to pay the admission price, and it's only if you're invited. The reason why Kabuki, though, stands out from its Noh counterpart is because where Noh is about spirituality, demons conversing with men, about all of this deeply political, insightful, philosophical stuff, Kabuki is different. Early Kabuki was performed by women, and it quickly became associated with prostitution, and that sparked a moral panic. It's the reason, or at least one of the reasons, why the government decided that women were going to be banned from Kabuki altogether, just like I said earlier. So, Noh is about all of this deep philosophical thinking, whereas Kabuki is just, I'm gonna take pot shots at everybody I can get away with it, because of course it is. Kabuki is exaggerated movements, loud music, and dramatic scene changes. Entertainment for common people is the best way to describe it. But why this matters historically is that Noh and Kabuki are not just theater, they're records of Japanese social philosophy. Noh preserves how elites understood death, duty, and the soul, while Kabuki shows ordinary people and how they processed injustice, desire, and repression. Both survive today as close to what they were when they were originally instated. But the reason why this really jumps out in this episode is because once we know everything that happens, it's kind of hard to distinguish what really is the difference between them. Because from a point of view of somebody who's not well versed in it, you just think it's the same Kabuki stage play, except now it's more confined. But that's not the case at all. While all of this is happening in this episode, you are very aware of the limitations of what is happening. Specifically for Kabuki, there can be a million different people on stage, and as long as the story calls for it, all of them may have speaking roles. Noh Theater is not executed in this fashion. Noh Theater has two people who talk all the time. If you see other people on the stage, they are either the accompanying musicment or are just there as human backdrops. They're not supposed to talk, which is why it makes it really interesting that if you have this framework for this episode, all of a sudden it takes on a very different connotation. But, and I cannot stress this enough, Noh is highly codified and regulated by the Imoto system. So why is this important? Well, because in Noh, there's just mask, and it's a box play. It's literally performed on a box-like stage, which is actually what happens in this episode. Everything suddenly starts to take place in a very, very strict box-like dynamic, and that's important. The reason why I bring this up is because the woman is asked by what we again to presume to be the Mononoke to marry him, and a whole entire wedding takes place. And it's really sad is because we see her being married to the samurai, and we see her being married to what we again perceive to be this masked Mononoke. When she is having the I'll just call it what it is. The second wedding, it's more lively, it's more festive, she seems more happy. When we see her with the original wedding that she had, she's very subdued and quiet, and it's just an overall tragic affair. This is important to keep in mind is because her second wedding is interrupted by her mother, which plays a very significant role in what is happening in this. As the show goes on, we are constantly subjected to what is basically a bunch of trauma that this woman is not willing to even discuss, constantly popping up. The medicine seller does make a reappearance and is able to subdue the masked man and bind him, and then it is just him and the woman. And they are having a discussion, and he makes her go through her life like it is a no play. The reason why the no play is very significant in this episode is because the box play only has 2 characters talking ever. Even though there is an ensemble cast with all the masks, there's only ever 2 people allowed to speak. Everyone else is literally just musicians and background characters that don't even fucking make an appearance, they're just implied. So why is it important that is brought up? 2 reasons. If you know what the no play is, it's very weird that there's 3 people talking, because that's not how a no play ever acts. There's no third party talking to you. There's not even a narrator. There's the guy who's the hero, there's the guy that's the bad guy. That's it. There's 2 people talking, so this third party is questionable. When everything is happening with the medicine seller, forcing the woman to literally confront what is happening, she is presented with her whole life, and we, the audience, are subjected to the trauma that she has had to suffer through. Her mother, born to a moderately unremarkable family, has pushed her daughter to maintain her beauty for the sole purpose of marrying into a wealthy samurai family, which the woman inevitably does, but the marriage is overall unhappy. We do come to find out that her spouse had a wife prior to her, and that wife ended up killing herself. As the show progresses, we are shown the abuse that she has suffered through not only her husband, but also her mother. When we get to the climax of the episode, we come to find out 2 very important things. 1, the question that the medicine seller keeps asking her, who did you kill, is finally answered.
一体何人殺したんです。あなたが本当に殺したのは誰だ。誰を殺した。お嬢さん、誰を殺した。お前が殺したのは誰だ。
私が殺したのは。
And number 2, we come to find out that the Mononoke wasn't the masked man at all. The Mononoke originally latched itself onto her maladaptive daydreaming. Her maladaptive daydreaming became so invested in keeping this fantasy and lie up that everything that happens is happening because she's wanting it to. She was the monster, and the person she killed was herself. I feel really bad for our main character in this is because even though we are never explicitly told that she suffers anything other than verbal and mental abuse, it is highly implied that she does suffer some physical abuse from her husband. And the medicine seller, even though he is going to exorcise her, does feel pity for her. And that's really important. Even though she is the Mononoke that he's been sent by his own volition, I might add, to exorcise and kill, he still feels bad for her is because this monster was just because she was so unafraid of dying. She didn't want to be alive anymore. She was disassociating so hard, she got an entire demon to basically latch onto her and had the demon feel bad for her. Like, that is saying something.
強いて言うならば恋でもしたんじゃないですかね。あなたに叶うわけなどないのに悲しきもののけだ。
悲しきもののけ。ありがとう。
Now, I don't have statistics for Edo and Meiji era Japan, but I can bring up statistics for something a little bit more modern, because that's a lot more important. According to the National Police Agency, or the NPA, police received 88,619 domestic violence complaints in 2023, a record high, and a 4.9 increase over the previous year. This marks the 20th consecutive year of increase in domestic violence-related consultations. Notably, about 30% of those victims were men, a significant increase from about 1.8% 15 years earlier, suggesting greater reporting by men. Survey data shows how common partner violence actually is. A domestic violence survey from Japan's Cabinet Office in 2024 found that among people who had been married or in a marriage-like relationship, 27.5% of women and 22% of men reported some experience of violence, including physical, psychological, economic, or sexual abuse from a partner. But what counts as domestic violence in Japan? Under Japanese law, domestic violence includes more than simply physical abuse. It also covers psychological abuse, economic control or deprivation, sexual coercion, or intimidation. These broader forms were recognized in recent legal reforms to reflect the realities faced by victims. Japan's mate statute addressing domestic violence is the act of the previous spousal violence and the protection of victims. Key developments are recent revisions from 2023 all the way to 2024, leading into this new year. A major revision of the domestic violence prevention law was passed in 2023, and it took effect officially in April of 2024. Mental abuse was officially recognized alongside physical violence as protection-worthy, acknowledging that non-physical forms can be deeply harmful. Protection orders were strengthened, with longer durations, now up to a whole year, and harsher penalties for violations, such as higher fines and longer potential imprisonment. The law primarily protects current or former cohabitating spouses and partners. So-called dating domestic violence, where partners have not lived together, isn't fully covered, meaning victims often must use other laws, like the stalker regulation law, to get protection. Many victims still do not open up to authorities. Surveys indicate significant underreporting, especially for non-physical forms of abuse. Raising awareness and reducing stigma is an ongoing policy goal. Reporting by male victims, however, is increasing, though support structures, like shelters, are still limited. Observers note that rising reports likely reflect both increased incidents and greater willingness to report. However, children in domestic violence can't be wiped away either from this conversation. Local support data, like from Okinawa, shows many domestic violence cases also involve children living in the household, highlighting multi-layered family impacts. Japan has domestic violence support centers and hotlines often run jointly by government and NGOs. The nationwide domestic violence consultation number is 8008 in Japan if you need it. Municipal and prefectural domestic violence support centers provide counseling, safety planning, and referrals for shelters, legal help, and medical care. Some shelters exist for victims and their children, but shortages and funding challenges are frequently reported by providers and advocacy groups. Victims can seek civil protection orders, restraining orders, and referral to legal assistance services. Changes in law aim to broaden protection and coordinate among agencies. So what are the key takeaways from all of this? Well, domestic violence remains a significant issue in Japan, with record high police consults and reports rising year over year. Legal recognition of psychological abuse and stronger protection since 2024 are a good thing, but they could still do more. A wide range of behavioral legally defined as domestic violence is still up for debate, and ongoing challenges with underreporting, especially for non-physical abuse, and specifically among male victims, is still a huge problem. Why am I bringing up all this modern crap for an anime from 2007? Because, again, while I don't have any, and I do mean that, any statistics for Edo and Meiji era Japan, if these are the numbers for things as recently as 2024, what is happening in this era? How much violence against women or domestic partners at all was happening? We just don't know. The reason why this arc to me is so sad is because this woman was abused her whole life in different ways, shapes, or form, primarily starting with her mother, who wanted to push her to do something as stupid as marry rich. But again, in this time period, there's only 4 classes. You're either a rich samurai or a poor merchant. And if you're a poor merchant, life's really hard for you. I understand why her mother would try to push her into a marriage that would give her financial stability. However, she made it so her daughter was so unenthusiastic about her life and so unprepared for everything that was going on around her due to all the abuse she suffered that she literally checked out of her own life, and a monster took up residency in her head just because she was so sad. The medicine seller throughout all of this, even though we're only in Act 3, isn't necessarily the good guy. It's just he's the person that goes after these monsters. And in this episode, he is high-key kind of abusive towards her as well, because he keeps shoving her at the truth and she keeps trying to deflect. And I know why he's doing it, because he needs to get to what he needs in order to even start performing the exorcism. But this isn't really where she's trying to be cagey on purpose, where it's trying to hide because it knows it's going to die. It's hiding because to admit that any of the abuse in childhood or in her marriage happened is to admit that things were not going well for her. She needed the lie that she was happy enough and then she just killed her husband to be enough of a thing to work for her. She needed the masked man that she made up in her head to be real, because that was the only way that she was going to survive this. I feel really sad for her in this arc. And I know there are 1,000 reasons why killing your spouse in cold blood is not good. But let's be so fucking for real right now. It's not like women make up the vast majority of like spousal killing ever, anywhere in the world. It's mostly men. And again, I understand why all of this is happening. I understand why we are going down this route for this woman. But I can still feel bad for her.
しかし誰もいない。
So this arc in Mononoke is 100% a haunted house story. And that's actually really fun, is because in this we are introduced to 3 men who are here for the prospect of convincing a woman to marry them, and the medicine seller just happens to also be here for the prospect of exorcising a Mononoke. A win-win for everybody involved.
中来藩は海鮮問屋を営んでおじゃりまするが、河野道では知られたお方。先だって奥方を亡くされたでおじゃるな。
さようでんな。
室町藩は東侍でおじゃったな。御所にはお役目で来ておじゃると。
さよう。身ども河野道には未だ浅いものの、武士の道にも通じるものと存じておる。瑠璃姫をめとらば一層精進する所存。
さようでおじゃりまするか。かくいうこなたは公家の大沢ロボと申します。あと一人は。
どうも。
So, these 3 men are here because the woman that is hosting this competition says that she has a rare item and she has a school for the smelling of incense. I'll explain what that means as soon as we get there. These men are all prominent figures. 2 of them already participate in society with this, and one of them is a samurai, although he comes from a country background. The play progresses for us as follows. The men have to compete in the competition. The medicine seller gets roped in because the last suitor is missing. They participate in the ritual of courtship for this lady whom they have never met, for the thing that they want more than her. Come to find out, the 4th suitor was killed by the samurai because the 4th suitor made fun of him. And then one guy kills the lady that they are trying to woo because in his mind, if he can kill her, then they can just get the thing because it'll be left unattended. Cue the Mononoke, messing all of it up. The Mononoke in this is, I'm just gonna call it what it is for my American viewers. Hi. It's a mimic. It'll be anything you need it to be, because that's just how it operates and roams around. It's very prolific at this little game of it, because it's killed a lot of people in apparently a lot of time, because it's figured out how to make a hunting ground for itself, whatever it needs to be, in order to get people to wander in all on their own. And people are stupid enough to do it. For the record, haunted house narratives are not unique to Japan. They're found all over the world. But let's talk about this incense thing, because I swear to God, when I was watching this, I was like, I don't understand this. Is this just a thing that was in ancient Japan? No, it wasn't. I had to spend so much time researching this and going down a rabbit hole, and now I know it, so now you guys are going to know about it. If you don't care, skip here for the end, because we're going to be here in a minute. So what am I talking about with this incense stuff? Because I also didn't know. I had to sit there and be like, I have no idea what they're talking about. I don't understand what this is. Let me explain to you the magical art of KŌDŌ. So, KŌDŌ is literally the way of incense, where you listen to fragrance, which is exactly what half of this episode is about. Let's go through the timeline, boys and girls, because it's actually super detailed and super involved. So, Japan at this time really only partied with everybody that it could get to, which was China and the Koreas. And that's actually how incense arrives in Japan between the 6th and 8th centuries. Asuka to the Nara periods in Japan. Incense arrived in Japan from China and Korea alongside Buddhism, which I don't have time to get into the religious aspect, we're just here for the incense. Initially, it was only used in temples for purification, offerings to the Buddha, and also for funeral rites. Incense was considered sacred, not recreational. So, incense, at this point in time, from the Asuka to Nara periods, is considered divine, purity, communication with the spiritual world, which sounds well and good. And then all the people that were rich had to fuck it up for everybody. Let's jump ahead to the Heian period, between 794 to 1185. Damn, Sukuna, you're old. So, here's what happens. Incense is usually, up until this point, for the divine, for spirituality, for religion. When this period happens, the Heian period, the aristocrats make it a part of their lifestyles. Nobles used incense to perform all kinds of stupid stuff. They would use it to perfume their robes and their letters, mark personal identities like, oh, Shogun Imboto smells like sandalwood. That's his signature scent. Think of it like a perfume, but not really. And they would compete in scent blending contest, Taki Mono Awase, which is actually what this episode is about. This is the courtship ritual that they are having to be dragged into. So,
Genjiku?
源氏公と来ましたんかいな。もっと簡単に竹取の子なんかでやらはるのかと。
すまんが。源氏公とは5種類の子を順番に聞き、どれとどれが同じ子であるかを当てるのでおじゃる。
はあ、五種はこのように図形で示しますんや。組み合わせは全部で52種。50?
Incense becomes more art and memory and a social language instead of being for rituals and purification and all that other stuff. It still is in some respects, but it's moved to be more, it smells nice. This is also where we find the samurai and Zen influence for incense. This is happening between the Kamakura and Muromachi periods, between 1185 to 1573. Warrior elites adopt incense practices alongside tea ceremonies, flower arrangements, and Noh Theater, which we just talked about literally not that long ago. Incense becomes a discipline, not an indulgence. Zen Buddhism reframes incense as stillness, focus, awareness of impermanence. Basically, you have to listen to what the smell is saying to you. It becomes a way. Just like tea ceremonies, sword play, calligraphy. Literally, chado, kendo, shodo. all of it is a way. The way of the tea, the way of the sword, the way of the calligraphy. Incense is training the mind and spirits in this period. And this is kind of where we have to do our jumping off point, because in the Muromachi period, 2 major schools are founded, the Oiryu and the Shinryu. Rules, etiquette, and games become standardized. It's how people can tell if you're actually learning anything about this. It's the reason why the 2 suitors of this are dismissive of their country samurai counterpart, is because they don't think he has the rules and etiquette and standardization of all of this that they do. They dismiss him because they think he doesn't know anything. He doesn't know anything. Incense is no longer burned, it's heated gently, so that way it never smokes. You don't smell incense anymore, you listen to it. If this sounds silly, I know it does, I know it does. But this is where we actually come in this story. Because Mononoke takes place between the Edo and Meiji period, we have to actually go to the Edo first and then get all the way to the Meiji. We're not that far away from it, since the Edo period took place between 1603 and 1868. So what happens? KŌDŌ becomes part of elite education. It's practiced by samurai, court nobles, and wealthy townspeople. It incentivizes people of higher classes to really know this, because incense appreciation games flourish, and people make fun of each other backhandedly for not being able to smell the way of the incense. Manuals and classifications also appear, and it also somehow, don't ask me how, 10 virtues of incense are written down, including but not limited to clear the mind, calm the spirit, sharpen focus, don't fatigue even when used often. I don't know how they got these rules. I went looking, I must have missed it, I don't know, but they do. The key takeaway though in the Edo period is that KŌDŌ is both ritual and refined leisure now as one and the other. So why is that important? Well, because throughout this entire episode, these men are treating it like it's only for samurai, it's only for court nobles. They don't expect their country samurai counterpart to know anything, because they are dismissive of him, because they don't think the country can offer of anything of value, which they're wrong, there's stuff that can be found for it. Counterpoint, they don't think the medicine seller knows anything because he's part of the merchant class, which is the lowest ranking class in the 4-class system, which is how we get to the more modern eras, the Meiji, all the way to the present. With Meiji era, everything, right? We're just going to say everything. Meiji era ends up modernizing a lot of stuff, including traditional arts. KŌDŌ survives through preservation efforts, though. Today, it's practiced in schools, demonstrated at cultural events, and recognized as intangible cultural heritage. Because so many of the woods that were used in this have now become rare, since they are either protected or extremely scarce, this is really only we only bring this out when the people are here, kind of a thing. The fancy silverware, if you will. KŌDŌ is living tradition, quiet, rare, and deliberate. But what actually happens in KŌDŌ? Like, realistically? Well, we kind of see it here. You have to sit nicely, the room is calm and silent, the tools are arranged precisely, you gotta heat up the incense correctly, and then you have to listen to it, which means you have to smell it really good. It's usually put in a cup, and it's passed hand to hand. Every person inhales gently. Nobody says anything out loud because you don't want to influence other people. And then you just sit with it and be like, what am I feeling right now? You are experiencing time and memory and mood, which is what the game, when we're in this episode, does portray. And the men in the game do smell things, and they have moments where they're like, oh, this smell thinks of this and that. And I'll just play the clip, actually, because it's kind of funny.
どうぞ。
一の香にして覚悟すがすがしき香り、まるで新たな出会いに胸膨らませる春の訪れのような。
どうぞ。
これは
一の子にしてこらいに懐かしい香り。子供の頃家は貧しゅうとも心までは貧しゅうなったらあかんと叱ってくれたあの父のような。
どうぞ。
2の子炊き上がりました。3の子炊き上がりました。
これはマナクかマナバンか。
どう違うというのだ。どれも同じではないのか。このままでは。
4の子炊き上がりました。
これはこの匂いならわかる。これはバフン。
So why do we still have this in the modern age? Well, because it's a cultural heritage thing. You're always going to have your cultural heritage, no matter what happens, because that's just it. But there is a philosophy of KŌDŌ. Incense is fleeting, and it reminds us of impermanence. A smell is only there for however long it's going to be in your nose, and you can't grasp smell unless somebody teaches you how to grasp it, like picking out the finer notes of a really extremely expensive wine. In contrast to modern life, there's no speed, no productivity, and no consumption about it. It's just you sitting with it and learning about it. Which is why this Mononoke is so insidious, is because it's implied, not outright stated, that this thing being a mimic can find out whatever it needs to do in order to get people to be lured in. It's gotten all the way to where it's picking out the higher class of people instead of every country bumpkin that happens to wander past, because now it knows exactly how to get them. For these guys, this MacGuffin, which is what I'm going to call it, is what they're after. The woman that this thing is pretending to be holds no value to them. Which I guess I could go on a long tirade about that, but we're not going to. My point is, this episode is a spooky ghost story told via a haunted house. And it's about a thing that is smart enough to know how to get its prey, which I think is really cool. But you have to also understand the cultural implications of this. I didn't know this, so I went on a deep dive for it, so you guys could learn about it, so you guys can have fun with that. Do whatever you want to do with these couple episodes. Highlight goes out to the three suitors. They are so funny in this. They are constantly, every time they're on screen, I'm like, why are we playing it Abbott and Costello? I don't, I'm not mad about it, but why are you guys like this?
何かありましたんか？あては目が悪うおますよって。
そうか。それは難儀な。しまった。自走自反の。
何かありますのんか？
あげてはならんでおじゃる。
この奥には女衆には見せられぬようなとっても下品なものがあるのだ。
そやほんまにハレンチなんや。
そうどすか。ほどほどに。
Okay, so the final arc of Mononoke, of this 12-episode series, is literally episode 10, 11, and 12, so the final 3 episodes. And it's just a proper whodunit murder mystery. The episode opens with a woman literally falling to her death, and you can be forgiven for thinking, well, she did it herself, because the suicide rate in Japan has historically always been pretty high. We see a cat and its little cone of shame, this poor kitty, and then a train runs them both over. And that's where we basically get started. There's a lot of mannequins in this episode too, which is supposed to describe people that were supposedly there during these events, but definitely didn't have any major roles to play in all of it. And of course, as always, our medicine seller has once again re-entered the chat, and it actually shows him talking up a massive fucking storm before we even see him. So whatever is happening is such a big conversation that he is having an argument with his sword right out the gate. The entire episode plays out as a whodunit and where all of the major players were, and it casts a lot of doubt constantly on what everybody is saying and why they're saying it. For the record, this was actually a really good episode, just because if you don't know what you're getting into, the entire thing, from start to finish, super duper clean as far as story from one thing to the next. It reminded me, when I was rewatching it for this video, I was like, this is reminding me of The Murder on the Orient Express by Agatha Christie. I don't know if anybody has ever seen The Murder on the Orient Express by Agatha Christie, but you have probably more than likely seen the movie of the same name. Detective Hercule. Her stories are always really great. You guys should totally read Agatha Christie. It's one of the classics for a reason. Super solid, 10 out of 10. So you come to find out that the woman who you think at the beginning of the episode was actually a murder victim, not a suicide victim. And the guy who did it has the most bull honky reasons ever invented by man and God himself for why he did it. If you're thinking it's some nefarious scheme and plot, I hate to break it to you, it is not. It is because the woman was actually proving to be not only a competent reporter, but a competent newswoman in general. She was able to track down leads, able to follow up on like straggling paths to connect to things, and was overall about to break a huge story. And this guy decided, you know what, it's not worth my time and effort, and I'm gonna sell her out and then go from there. That's exactly what he does. I will acknowledge right here and now, because I feel that it is fair to you, the audience, the sequence of events that you are seeing on screen is pretty rough, and if it's something that you can't handle, 100% understand, skip to this timestamp in order to avoid this terrible sequence as I describe everything that's going on, or simply walk around with the audio playing in the background. That also works. Anyway, so the man actually is hired by the conductor of the train, and by that I mean the guy who owns the train company, because she has discovered through just being a really good reporter that the man who owns the railway company who wants to start it is actually double dealing in a lot of stuff and is starting to make compromising deals that would actually end up with a lot of people hurt or killed if he ends up getting away with it. This guy, because he's so mad that this woman reporter is doing a better job than him at getting the scoop on this, sells her out to this railway owner, and the railway owner basically tells him, okay, burn the evidence and get rid of her. And that's exactly what he does. The reason why the Mononoke is so strong and so attached is because she died aggravated. She died so mad at this man, even up to her last moment, that it ended up becoming this Mononoke. Her and the cat are all wrapped up into one. She wants revenge for what he specifically did, which is why all the mannequins are there. She has rigged up this entire system to demand her retribution. Now, I remember talking to a friend, you guys have probably never met them, or I've probably mentioned them. Laura, was talking to Laura about this because I've gotten her into this, as one does with one's friends, you know, drag them into tits of hell with you. And she asked me, she goes, isn't this like how certain spirits in Japan are made? And I had to look at her for a minute. I was like, you wanna, I don't know, like narrow that down at all, even a little bit? And then she was like, Onryo, and I was like, yes, good job. I am so glad that my nerdimus is running off on you. Truly, it brings me joy beyond belief. But I told her, no. And she goes, why? I was like, Onryo are born from very specific means. This woman was just pissed and wanted revenge on this guy and these people specifically because they could have helped her, and they didn't. And that's why it's not an Onryo. And again, she just looked at me, she goes, alright, I'll explain. I'll explain. She looked at me, she goes, okay, explain it to me. And I was like, okay, I can try. And then we did. So, I'll try my best to explain it here. Sorry, I am recording this and I'm just a little bit tired. Because it's so much research, I'm so sorry. So, in traditional Japanese belief and literature, Onryo is literally a vengeful spirit. Sometimes wrathful, depending on how you want to read it. It actually has a lot of stuff. Wrathful, hatred, resentful, ruthless, envious, dark, fallen, downcast. Anyway, they're a type of Yokai. They are believed to be capable of causing harm in the world of the living, injuring or killing enemies, or even causing natural disasters to exact vengeance to redress the wrongs it received while alive, then taking their spirit from their dying bodies. Onryo are often depicted as wronged women who are traumatized, envious, disappointed, bitter, or just infuriated by what happened during life and exact revenge in death. These kinds of ghosts appear extremely vengeful, cruel, deranged, egotistical, bloodthirsty, and heartless. So I had to explain to Laura, she's not an Onryo. She didn't die bitter and angry and all this other shit. She died because a man felt entitled to her work and felt that she was moving in on his territory and everything that he could do, and he killed her out of jealousy. All she wants is to pay him back tenfold for what he did to her. That's it. But it doesn't make her an Onryo. Like, she didn't have a bunch of stuff that happened to her and then, you know, she became this. She became Mononoke along with this little kitty cat. Again, the cats are everywhere in this, and I feel bad is because early in Japanese railway construction, a lot of animals, not just specifically cats, died because of the construction, but that's everywhere in the world. That's not specific to Japan. So then why am I bringing it up? Well, because this railway scandal is actually something set in, like, reality, and I think it's funny. So during the Meiji period, which is when this takes place, and it's also the beginning of Western fashion, which is when we see it here in these episodes. So during the Meiji period, starting around 1872, with Japan's first railway, the rapid expansion of railways was as much about politics and business as it was about transportation. Private companies competed fiercely for profitable routes, with disputes over management and control, especially in Kyushu Railroad Company reforms, driven by conflicts between major zaibatsu like Mitsubishi and Mitsui. These struggles had political and financial overtones, illustrating how early railway infrastructure was tied to elite business interest, which is literally what gets this woman killed, is because she was able to discover major political opponents, not only vying for this railway that eventually becomes haunted because of her, but also just because in a country that literally runs off of their high-speed rail trains, having control of them in any way, shape, or form is having some shape or form of political power. This doesn't just end in the Meiji era either. There's also post-war rail mysteries and sabotage allegations all the way back in 1949. Specifically, the Shiyoyama, Mitaka, and Matsuwaka incidences. In 1949, Japan experienced 3 highly controversial railway incidents that became major legal and political scandals. Shiyoyama incident happened circa 1949. The president of Japanese National Railways, or the JNR, Saidonori Shiyoyama, was found dead on a railway track under mysterious circumstances shortly after JNR layoffs, leading to suspicions of foul play, which was basically, was it intentional or did he do it? Police coercion of suspects and ongoing debates about whether union activism played a role. Please note that the English Wikipedia page exists, but was not directly cited here, because this is so much like, did it or didn't it happen on purpose, that it kind of just doesn't matter. Please know this was a real event. Please look at the screen. The Mitaka incident on July 15th, 1949. An unmanned train handled Tide crashed into Mitaka Station, killing 6 people and injuring 20 more. 10 people, mostly Communist Party members, were initially charged with sabotage, though later the court rulings found only the conductor guilty. Amid claims his confession was forced. Matsukawa derailment, August 17th, 1949. A steam train derailed after track tampering. 3 crew died. 20 suspected saboteurs, including union members, were convicted but eventually acquitted on appeal. The case became a symbol of miscarriage of justice amid political strife in post-war Japan, collectively called the 3 big railway mysteries of 1949. These events stirred public distrust of authorities, unions, and the industrial labor movement in early post-war Japan. Please keep in mind, Japan was nuked by us, the United States, and it caused them a lot of strife because so much of their, well, everything was basically wiped off the map. This rebuilding of everything was important. While not always scandals in the sense of corruption, Several fatal accidents exposed systemic problems in rail safety, signaling practices, and organizational oversight. A great example of this is Sakurajiko train fire in 1951. On April 24th, a fire aboard a train near that station killed 106 passengers. The tragedy was linked to poor maintenance designs, combustible materials, and inadequate exits, triggering resignations from railway leaderships and leading to improved fireproofing and emergency systems. That's one real quick way to start making people mad, is if the only transportation they've got is suddenly proven to be dangerous. People are going to start to want answers. Another great example of this is the Rokon Railway accident in 1956. A collision at Rokon Station caused 42 deaths and 94 injuries, largely due to signal errors, prompting signal system improvements. The Mikawashima train crash in 1962, one of Japan's deadliest rail accidents. This multi-car train collision near Tokyo killed 106 people and injured nearly 300. Highlighting the need for advanced fail-safe signaling and better traffic control. The Shigaraki train disaster in 1990. The Shigaraki train disaster in 1991. A collision between a JR West train and a third sector line train killed 42 and injured 614. Investigations revealed unauthorized signal system notifications by both companies. A stark example of how operational shortcuts and lax oversight can lead to disaster. These episodes underscored chronic safety weak points and helped spur regulatory and technical reforms over several decades. But why is that important? Why am I bringing up all these scandals when I'm talking about an anime from 2007? Well, because JR privatization and organization controversies in the 1980s through the 1990s have a really big part to play in all this. Japan's national railway, the JNR, decline and privatization is happening. This means that by the 1970s and 80s, the Japanese National Railway faced financial trouble between strikes and labor disputes and declining public trust from all this other stuff happening. It exasperated by frequent delays and poor working conditions. Riots and neighbor conflicts in the early 1970s were part of the backdrop of mounting frustrations. In 1987, the railway was privatized and split into the JR Group companies. Many scholars and analysts argue that political pressure, management controversy, and structural mismanagement accelerated this transition. Okay, that's great, but what does that mean? Okay, break it down to brass tacks. The long and short of this, in every single capacity, is super duper simple. People were getting aggravated from all the way in the Meiji era all the way until the 1990s. 1991, 1962, 1956, 1951, 1949. Like, just the year of 1949, so much happened. 1872. It's one thing after another with the railway system. If it wasn't because people were taking shortcuts, it was because other people were just straight up not keeping track of things they were supposed to. So this privatization of the Japanese railways makes 100% sense. Now when you go to Japan and run on the rails, they're pretty tight run because they don't have an option to be run anyway else. In 2024, Japan Freight Railway Company revealed that inspection data related to wheel set assembly, which was press fit pressures, was falsified at several depots, with records manipulated to show compliance with standards when actual measurements exceeded the limits. This was linked to a cargo train derailment and forced railways to halt wide portions of operations for safety verification. The Ministry of Land, Infrastructure, Transportation, and Tourism ordered emergency inspections and a special audit. This scandal resounded because it involved internal safety data manipulation, with potential widespread impacts on rail freight safety and public trust. So, if you go on the trains now, they run a lot tighter, but as I just said, in 2024, stuff can still slip through. People are still trying to cut corners. But there's also broader themes with all of this train talk. Political and labor tensions are a big one. Post-war sabotage allegations, Mitaka, Matsukawa, reflected political tensions between labor unions, government authorities, and ideological conflicts in a recovering nation. Technical oversight and corporate culture also became a big factor in all of this. Accidents like Sakurajiko and Shigaraki reveal how design choices, signal system tampering, and operational decisions can escalate into tragedies and push major reforms through because the people are not gonna deal with it, considering they're the ones that are taking the brunt of the death penalty. Privatization aftermath moves the public transportation into a private sector, meaning that these companies reshape everything seemingly overnight. Investments in safety culture become their top priority because their bottom dollar is directly affected by people using the system. Modern compliance and data integrity is also super duper important to everything at this point, because they really don't have an option when Japan is literally run on the railway system. I know this sounds like me hemming and hawing and talking about stuff that makes no sense. The long and short of it is, Mononoke is based on this arc. This arc is based on a railroad scandal that one woman was able to find out about. And it sounds silly to Westerners because we don't really have a railway system that is used by people religiously to go everywhere. Our trains are pretty cut and dry. Actually, here's a map of all the trains that you can take as a person in the United States and how long it's going to get there. Here, I'm going to put it right here. Boop! This is the Japanese railway system. Behold, it goes everywhere. It's on purpose. The railway system in Japan is used to go everywhere because everybody uses it. Railway systems in America, not so much. You're pretty limited on where you're going to go on a train. We're a flying country, not a train country. So the reason why this railroad scandal is such a big part of the final arc is because this woman was able to find out all of this stuff, and it's implied that these trains are you just literally listened to a Meiji era accident like 17 minutes ago. That's my point. Cutting corners and doing all this sketchy shit isn't new. In fact, it's pretty spot on. And I think that's the major problem that a lot of people miss. If you don't know any of this stuff, which I'll admit, I didn't know any of this train stuff, I had to go digging and rooting around. God bless the internet. But I didn't know any of that. I was a Westerner that had to go find out all of this information, vet the sources. I still don't think I'm qualified to think that these are real, but I'm gonna, say, it looked legit enough. That's my point, right? It's not hard to find the information, but if you don't know, because Westerners just don't, a lot of these arcs in Japanese stories sometimes skip people because it's just not well known. Now, if you're a big anime nerd like me, you knew this shit from day one. In fact, you were banking on it. But that's my point. Mononoke is a lost art form, all the way down to literally how it looks, which is why the movies coming out are so freaking awesome, because now new people that are on Netflix and other stuff can totally go ahead and find it and get involved in it. And again, I found this on YouTube. I'm gonna put up the person's name who has it. Shout out to this person who has all 12 episodes. For my English people who need English dub, if you watch it on Netflix, there is an English dub. I promise you, you won't like it, but you'll suffer through it. It's very early 2000s anime dub. You'll know what I'm talking about if you've been in the trenches long enough. However, and I can't stress this enough, if you don't mind having to read subtitles, it's pretty good. The movies do not have an English translation as of yet. So if you're gonna watch the movies, which I will be making videos on, divorced and separate from this, keep an eye out. Anyway, that's really all I've got for Mononoke. So thank you guys so much for stopping by. All that YouTuber stuff. Click, like, share, subscribe, all that stuff. Anyway, bye!